I have another note here talking about public officials because I'm in Canada. I've been kind of following this, and it seems like in some states, maybe including Alabama, some of the justice of peace, whoever does this stuff, they're refusing to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples. I find it a little more clear here. I don't know what you think about that.
There have been a couple of judges. I know one specifically, I can't remember his name, here in Alabama, who sought counsel from his superiors. In other words, he wrote a letter and he said, listen, I'm a Christian. This is in conflict of my religious belief. Legally, what are my options? And there have been others all over the country that basically the judges, as I see it, are having to choose between their religious beliefs and their jobs. In other words, if you're not willing to violate your religious beliefs by marrying same-sex couples, then you can't be a judge.
What did Hindus and Buddhists do down there? Did they get these things issued to them no problem by these? What's a Satanist to do down there?
I'm not really sure. I haven't looked into that. I would imagine they wouldn't have a problem getting a marriage license and getting married.
What's the big whoop then?
What's the difference?
Yeah.
Okay. If you've got, let's say, for instance, you've got 10 judges. 2 of them, or let's say 5 of them, half of them are Christians and don't want to marry anyone other than Christians. Well, you still have 5 more that really don't care and that can issue it. And I think it depends on what state you're in, but in most states or some states, religious beliefs should be accommodated to the point in which there's no harm done, and as long as the job can still get done. We've had some instances in which the people who issue marriage licenses have went to their bosses and said, I can't issue marriage licenses for same-sex couples because it conflicts with my religious beliefs. However, you have 9 other people here, or so many other people who can, so just give those cases to those people. And I would imagine, even though it hasn't really been talked about, admittedly, but I would imagine that would be the same case for anybody who is not necessarily a Christian, that option is open. Now, if you live in a small town and there's only one person in that office that works in that office that can issue marriage licenses, like I said, the religious belief should be accommodated to the point in which no harm is done, but the job still gets done. In other words, if you only have one person in the town and that one person or in the courthouse and that one person says that I can't issue marriage licenses because of my religious beliefs to certain people, then that person should be fired or forced to move on. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
The job still has to get done, but if there's other people who have the ability to do it, and you can still accommodate the religious beliefs of this person or these people, then I don't understand what the big deal is, what the issue is.
So you see how complicated things get then, and how you've got people who can only do a portion of their work, it seems, because I guess you're going to have to do some sort of vetting service where or triage where they'll be okay, well, here we have a lesbian Satanist marriage. What are we going to do with this? Any takers on this one?
Yeah.
And it seems more cut and dry to me. The other one with the cakes was a private enterprise. It was a business. That's a little tricky. But with this, we're talking about the state, which is supposed to be... Here we have the state that's supposed to be neutral. It's supposed to be secular. It's not supposed to be concerned with its religious concerns. Let's put it that way. For me, these people should be simply issuing the license to anyone who qualifies under the law to receive the licenses. And they should realize that when they're performing their duty as an employee of the state, they need to follow the law. They need to do what's required of them there. They can think it's disgusting. They can think that it's unholy. They can think all sorts of things. They can do their thing on Sunday or any other time outside of this office. But in the office, the state needs them to not opt out of their jobs. In a sense, just having a computer do it might work better. Yeah, I mean, for me, these people should be, they really should be doing their jobs. And in their heart of hearts, they could think, okay, because listen, when they're issuing the marriage license, what have you, to the Buddhists or the Hindus or the Muslims or what have you, I mean, they have their disagreements there too. Surely they must, right? So I don't see what. It really does seem like the homosexual thing really sticks badly in the craws of Christians in particular, in the U.S. in particular. It really seems to be almost an obsession, whereas you have other things, other sins, what have you, that just don't seem to get the same amount of airtime.
I have two questions for you, or 2 points I want to make on what you just said a minute ago. But before that, is it fair to characterize it as an obsession on the Christians' side of it? I mean, could it not just as much be perhaps the Muslims and the Hindus and the Buddhists who have to go through the process, and this person can't do it, but they go through the process of finding somebody else to do it, and they don't have a problem, and you don't hear about it. But if a same-sex couple gets refused the same service and has to go to somebody else, just like a Muslim may have to do, or a Hindu or a Buddhist, those are the ones you hear about because those are the ones who are filing the civil suits.
Yeah, I mean, perhaps. In both cases are wrong, in my opinion.
Yeah. But how so? As long as the job can get done, what does it matter who does it?
For me, it's a matter of principle. We can't have government employees denying services willy-nilly because of their own particular religious persuasions at any given time. I mean, I could get into the marriage business, I guess, and then I could have an epiphany, and the flying spaghetti monster's noodly appendage could come and anoint me, and then I could decide that I'm not going to marry anybody who eats gluten. I mean, that would probably be a lot of people, and I don't know how much of my job I would get done. Also, as a Muslim, and this has happened too, actually, as homosexual couples have gone into. I've seen video of this where homosexuals have gone in to the marriage offices and they've been denied outright. Video of this, and they said, the woman saying, I refuse to give you this license. Does that mean they need to then search around the building for someone to do this? I mean, how is this a proper representation of a secular state when you've got people just having their little religious fiefdoms within the government?
Okay, the question is denying to give a marriage license to a same-sex couple for religious beliefs the same as denying someone of a different religion a marriage license? I don't think that's a fair parallel, and here's why. It's because there's nothing immoral or sinful biblically about giving a marriage license or sanctioning a marriage by of a couple from a different religion. However, it is explicit in the Bible, and I believe morally wrong for same-sex couples to get married. There's nothing sinful about two Muslims getting married, for instance. So I think that if two Muslims showed up at the courthouse and asked for a marriage license, I don't think that there would be anything sinful for a Christian to follow through with that marriage license. However, when it comes to the same-sex issue, it's explicit in the Bible that homosexuality, and therefore same-sex marriage, is expressly against the Christian faith and most other faiths. So I don't think it's a fair parallel. I don't think that that one necessarily follows the other. And yeah, that's my revised answer. I think that's good. I hope you can cut it and edit it. Because anything's possible. You can do anything. I got faith in you. Okay. All right, but let me ask you this. Now, let's be clear on this. The Supreme Court ruling did not all of a sudden legalize same-sex marriage federally. Okay? Same-sex marriage was already legalized federally. Okay? Now, it was a state's issue. Now, I know this is the U.S. but I mean, I think you're pretty well educated on stuff that happens down here. At least that's what I've gathered from talking to you. But federally, same-sex marriage was legal. Okay? Now, all of a sudden, because of the Supreme Court ruling, now the states have their right to govern themselves taken away. Okay? That's what the Supreme Court ruling did. It forced the states who, according to their legislature that was voted in by their own people, okay? So it forced the states who do not want to conduct same-sex marriages, it forces them to do something that they don't want to do. Now, what you have now is you have states with government offices who have been complying with the laws of their states. Now they're all of a sudden having to comply with a federal law that forces them to change their laws. Now, according to what you're saying is that if an employee is not willing to do their job regardless of their religious beliefs, they should be fired, or they should be have to find another job. But now all of a sudden you have state legislatures and government office who have to all of a sudden comply with what the Supreme Court just ruled. So now all of a sudden, if there are certain people in that office, now they should be gotten rid of. You see what I mean? It's not like here in Alabama. It's not like they live in Massachusetts or California, who all this time same-sex marriage has been legal and they've had to work through it. Okay, because the people in this the people of the state voted their representatives into office, and the state as a whole, according to the people, chose to legalize same-sex marriage. Well, now Alabama here, and I'm just using this as an example, Alabama here are forced into this. Now, according to what you're saying, we need to fire all these people who have religious beliefs. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think that they definitely ought to, they really ought to go elsewhere if they can't do their jobs, because I think that they're not doing their jobs. I really do. Point final. I mean, can you imagine if, they're denying services. They should stop. That's it.
Yeah. But the government building itself, or the government itself, isn't denying services. It's just certain people in the building who have religious beliefs. Now, like I said, if everybody in the building, okay, now this is an extreme hypothetical, but if everybody in the building says I won't do it, then they need to find a new staff, or at least hire some people who are willing to do it. Okay, now I'll go along with that. But to say that you have to, if you work in a bakery, or if you do photos, or if you make T-shirts, or if you are a judge, or if you work in a government office, if you don't agree with same-sex marriage, then you need to find another job. I'm not sure how that can be considered fair and in line with equality. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I gotcha. I think we have a disagreement. I think that there could be definitely a transition period, but I think that was the case too, where with even the past. I don't know all the exact rulings, but there were brutal problems with civil rights down there as well. And I'm pretty sure that there were some people who had some problems with, let's say, desegregated schools or any number of other things. I really think that in the future, people will look back at this and see it as being something very similar. Yeah,
it may appear similar, but it's not the same, because one is a religious issue and the other's not.
Oh, but I think that it will not be a religious issue for the majority of Christians in the future. I really do. Up here in Canada, I don't know what percentage of Christians are okay with it, but I know that quite a few Christians that I've met, are fine with same-sex marriage.
Well,
so
if 90%
it'll get reframed. They find a way to reframe it, and then all of a sudden, it wouldn't surprise me if in 50 years you have people saying things like, "Oh, well, there's no way that LGBT people could have ever successfully gotten same-sex marriage without the help of the church."
Yeah, that's a hasty generalization, though.
A similar thing happened.
Everything would be okay.
A similar thing happened with race. I really do see it as similar. But okay, let's move on here. Would be to have you pitch whatever you want at me in the cosmological argument, like after that, and then we could resume afterwards. So basically, I would imagine that we won't even make it past the first point. So
Can I say one more thing? Can I say one more thing just on the same-sex issue? And we've already talked about most of it, but the third talking point, what are the ramifications? What I was going for there is if your point of view on this stands and takes over the United States, then what you have is you don't have religious people in office or in positions of authority. You don't have religious judges, whether Christian, Muslim. Basically, you have a country that's run by atheists without the freedom of any religious people, not just Christians, but religious people to hold positions of authority in the country.
But you see, that's not true, because in Canada we've had this for 10 years and there's still plenty of religious people in the government.
Mm-hmm. That violate their religious beliefs on a regular basis.
Well, I mean, it might not be their religious beliefs. It might be your religious beliefs that they're violating on a regular basis. And also, you have people in the more conservative parties who I believe would gladly roll back the laws, but they're not going to. They're not going to because they're not going to get elected. Yeah. So, I mean, for sure. And then you have people who are very religious who come from more liberal strains of Christianity, Catholicism, etc. Mm-hmm. So there would be a liberalization. If you're looking for the more conservative Baptist religious, you're going to find them in the more conservative parties, like the Conservative Party of Canada, and they for sure have a problem with same-sex marriage, but you're not going to hear them speak very loudly about it during the election.
Well, that was all I wanted. I didn't want to throw us back into another tangent. I was just just kind of wanted to point out that that's a possibility of even though it's a secular state, we'll have no religious people holding these particular offices.
Because you can dial that into the other direction. You could say that in order to be truly pious, your government needs to flip to a theocracy. You could dial that right up all the way to the other direction if you wanted to.
Yeah, I don't think that's a fair parallel, though.
You don't think so?
The Constitution, or specifically the Declaration of Independence, is a Christian-based document.
Oh, no. That's not.
Yeah.
Listen. I don't know how qualified I am to discuss this because I'm in Canada where our version of the Constitution it preambles with God right in it. It's right there.
Mm-hmm.
But there still is in fact there is no established in Canada. There's no official separation of church and state, but it has become very secular.
Either, believe it or not.
It has become very, very, very secular. I don't know how far I want to. I don't know how far I want to go into the whether the founding fathers wanted to set up a Christian nation, et cetera, et cetera.
But that's not. No. That's exactly my point. Okay, now, it is evident that the Declaration of Independence foundation is a Christian worldview. But what they did not want to do is to set up an exclusively Christian nation. That's what I'm saying is, you draw a parallel between throwing all religious people out of office and atheists running the country, and then your parallel is...
You're saying throwing all religious people out of office. What you're really saying is throwing all religious people who cannot stand letting other people get married who happen to be same-sex out of office.
Well, any religious people, whether Christian, Jews, or Muslim, let's just use those three for instance, who believe wholeheartedly in their own religion, yeah.
Yeah, but fine. Look, if you're a Muslim politician, are you going to turn around and start making laws against Christian religious ceremonies or religious points of view? I mean, who's forcing? If you're a government and you say, okay, we need to let same-sex marriage occur.
Mm-hmm.
You still can believe that this is not proper behavior as a Christian.
Mm.
But it's something you need to do. I mean, you need to let these people do. Are you going to start, or else, I guess you're going to start passing all kinds of laws, banning everyone from doing anything that's not Christian.
Well, no, that's not what I'm saying at all. It's what I'm saying is this ruling. That's what I said earlier, was same-sex marriage was already legal, or same-sex marriage or same-sex unions, whatever you want to call it, was already legal here. All right. You just have to go, you have to be in a state that allows it in its laws. Federally, it was already legal. What the Supreme Court did is it forced states who do not want to legalize it to make it legal. So, as a nation, as a whole, then same-sex marriage was legal. It was fine. It's not a big deal. So, but, the states... Like I said, we here in Alabama, for instance, elect our officials into office, our state officials. Our state officials get elected by running on and doing what their constituents want them to do or believe in. Does that make sense? It's just like if you go to California and if you're running for office, their constituents, because they're an extremely liberal state, their constituents do not want devout religious people in their offices. So they don't vote them into office. But here in Alabama, it's just the opposite. We want devout religious people in our offices, so we vote them into office. And what the Supreme Court did was override the states like Alabama and other conservative states that don't want same-sex marriage to be legalized in our states, the federal government says, well, that's too bad. It doesn't matter what your people say.
So
that's why I believe it's a state's issue.
What do you think? What do you think about the Supreme Court? Do you think it should be disbanded, or is it just wrong in this point of view? Do you think the laws should be made by referendum all the time, or by the rule? Let's say throw it on a ballot. Say, I don't know.
Have a true
for
democracy?
people's rights, or say rights. So let's say women's rights to vote. Should that be? Should that, back in the beginning of the century, should that have been a court thing or a legal thing? Or let's say even some of the Supreme Court rulings, on civil rights. I mean, should the rights of people be dependent on what the majority want, in particular minority groups?
Not necessarily. I think that's an unfair parallel, because in a republic, as we are, the majority doesn't rule. Now, when it comes to, and that's why I think it's so important to have the sovereignty of the states, or certain issues are states' issues. And that's because the people of a certain state can vote their officials in and out of office according to what the state as a whole believes. Now, then again, we have an electorate, specifically in our presidential elections. Also, I think our other elections too, that make sure that minorities get a fair share or a fair shake in the elections. That's why we have an electoral college, and why the government is set up in a certain way. I think the way that our government is set up, even though it's flawed in a lot of different ways, I think it's a good way to be. That no matter, if our nation was a true democracy, then slavery would have never ended. The civil rights issue would have never been swayed in the way that it was, because Black people in this country are a minority. So in a true democracy, they would have never gotten the freedom that they eventually got after the civil rights. You see what I mean? So there's a correct way to doing things, and I think that the way that we do things here, like I said, even though it's flawed, it overall works. Now, what doesn't work, and what I don't think is right, is when the federal government overrides the sovereignty of the states on certain issues. I think abortion should be a state's issue. I think same-sex marriage should be a state's issue. I think there's a number of things that should be a state's issue. The federal government should not be in the business of telling the states what to do.
I think that the problem there is would then be to determine what is a state's issue and what's not a state's issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that would be a completely different debate.